We see how terrible wars break out before our eyes in the 21st century. The war against Ukraine, the military conflict in Israel. The wars are intensifying. The world seems to be splitting into two parts. We see a clash of two civilizations, a growing conflict between the West and the East. Death, hell, terror, violence, a lot of pain and suffering are roaming the earth. Many people in entire countries start and support wars, hiding behind God and the Bible, justifying war by the fact that in the Old Testament, one nation could exterminate another. Does that mean that today we can also carry out judgment and punishment on other nations, exterminate and commit genocide? But how does God view this? What does the Bible say about the genocide of nations? Is there an answer for us today? Certainly there is, and in this video we will give answers to these questions. Let's look at the example of the Jewish people. Of all the others, God chose a people for himself and made a covenant with them. The Jews were to bring light and enlightenment to all the pagan nations. There were a lot of wars in the Old Testament times. That is why many say that the Bible is a bloody book of wars. But why did this happen? It was all because the tribes and ethnic groups increased their lawlessness, debauchery, and because their sins are piled up to heaven. God intervened and immediately judgment was carried out on earth for the sins of people. However, it was not the Jews themselves who carried out judgment on another people. It was God's judgment. We see that God sent the Jewish people to go and exterminate the godless nations. But at the same time, we see that if the Jewish people themselves fell into sin and idolatry, they could also fall into slavery because of this. As Jesus prophesied, the Jews were scattered throughout the world because they persecuted, killed the prophets, and crucified Jesus Christ. In the 70th year, Jerusalem was destroyed. For 2,000 years, the Jews wandered without their own state. But in 1948, Israel was restored. That is, time passed, God's forgiveness came for the people for all their sins. For 2,000 years, God's people suffered. They were oppressed, persecuted, killed, and the Lord shows his mercy and love. God promised the father of faith, Abraham, that the remnant will be saved. At the second coming, the Jews will accept Jesus Christ. This is why Israel was restored. What does this show? That God gives forgiveness, there is a calling, there is a covenant. And God preserved the Jewish people, Jewish blood on earth. The remnant will be saved and will come to Christ. Let's look at Ukraine. It was surrounded by empires on all sides. There were constant wars, famines, genocide of the nation. But this people survived. Ukraine is the territory where the Jews lived the most for many centuries.